I'm gonna put my hat on, no glare. Okay, I think what I'll do is before I start my official program, I had Melanie look up 3 books that I think are wonderful books if you're interested in gardening in general, vegetables in particular. The first one.
Oh, you're gonna just show that one.
Yeah, okay. Well,
yeah, that's fine.
All right. This is the one for if you really want to know everything. More than you need to know to be a general veggie gardener in your backyard. However, can they see all of this? All righty. This came out about 30 years ago, and I'm still rereading it. And every time I reread it, I learn something new that I didn't know. So that's one. 2 that are more simple. Are you going to bring them up?
Yep.
Okay.
The self-sufficient gardener.
Right. Okay. This one comes, does it say what year it was originally printed? The 70s or 60s even?
It doesn't.
I believe Seymour was British originally, but moved to California, if I remember correctly. And I had this book 30, 40 years ago. And it was just beautifully hand illustrated with lots of down-to-earth information about how to turn your backyard into your supermarket in a sense. So that would be another one. And the third one is from a local woman over next county or 2, Sally Cunningham, in her book about companion planting. Once again, a beautiful book as far as the illustrations go, and a lot of, I would say 90% accurate, practical advice about how to plant A with B, because they either like each other or they help each other out or they chase off bugs that like their neighbor, whatever it is. Or if they're beautiful together.
Yeah, the symbiotic relation.
Yes, what, Christian? Just speak up.
Yeah, about the symbiotic relation, how they are like connected and one can help the other one.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. My topic today is twofold, but I'm going to spend most of the time on the first one, which is about the compost heap. And I'm going to say right up front, there are 2 ways, basically, of doing this. The official scientific way, which makes a nice hot pile that will kill most pathogens and most weed seeds, but it takes more time and effort. And what they call the cold compost heap version, which is what I've come up with over the years, especially as I've gotten older, which works just fine. You just have to wait 2 years for it to get finished. What have we got here?
I don't see her.
We're hunting up some. By the way, Christian, this is Melanie, the head of the library, and this is Rima, and these 2 are the ones that got me into doing this, but Rima has to watch the front desk, so she can't really be here most of the time.
I don't see her trying to call in.
Okay.
Regina's trying to get hold of us.
Oh, Regina. Where is Regina?
She's trying.
Okay, Christian, one of our really interested participants does not have a computer, so she usually does this from her phone, and she's trying to phone in now, and I guess is having some trouble getting in. So we're just going to continue on with while we fiddle with the computer to bring Regina into the program.
Oh, I don't know.
Okay.
I gave her the ID
Before I go into how you make a compost heap and why we want to do that, I just want to mention, if we left everything up to Mother Nature.
Oh, I see her. I see her, Rena.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, Regina, can you hear us?
Hi. Yep,
Hi,
just
Regina.
now.
Okay.
Hi.
Okay.
And Regina, this is Christian, our new Master Gardener leader who's joined in today. He's up in the corner.
Oh,
Can you, I
Yeah.
forget,
You
on
can't
your,
see us.
oh, you can't see us. All right, she's on the phone.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So hi, Regina.
hi.
Nice to
So
hear you.
Nicole's not there.
All right. I was going to say that if we left everything up to Mother Nature, she recycles everything. No waste.
Yeah.
It's all, whatever grew there dies there usually. And usually, unless there's a big windstorm or the glacier or a flood, it stays there and gradually decomposes into the soil. But human beings with agriculture, we don't do that. We grow a crop and then we harvest it, which means we take off quite a bit of the organic matter, the corn, the lettuce, and we take it to the city maybe, and we eat it, and anything left over, we have a problem with disposing that, right? But usually we don't return it to the land. So for 10,000 years, we've been farming, and gradually our soils are deteriorating because mostly they're losing their original organic matter. Now, one of the reasons America, North America, is such a powerful country is because we wound up, pure luck, winding up with a continent that in the middle became our breadbasket over tens of thousands of years. And it was mostly grasslands, had grown and decomposed and grown and decomposed. So when you went out to the Midwest in the late 1800s, you had soil that could have been almost 4, 5, 6 feet rich topsoil, dark, lots of humus in it. And of course, we won't go into what we've done with it. That's another topic. But it enabled us in the beginning to becoming rich and powerful. It was our soil that did that. All right. Just briefly go back and talk about soil. Anybody that has studied Earth's history knows that in the beginning, there was nothing. No, I mean, we were a huge sphere of molten rock, maybe close to 1 billion years before things cooled down enough that the lava turned into rocks, bare rocks. And then in the depressions, gradually the rain built up and we have our oceans. And eventually, but it was a long time coming, the lichen, and then the moss, and then the ferns creeped up on the rocks, and the chemical reactions began to break up the rock into finer particles, which when they mixed with the dead and decaying living things, became soil. And I've argued with my neighbor on the hill about how rapidly soil can be replenished. And it usually takes 100 years for an inch of topsoil to be made from the bedrock. So if you carelessly lose it,
It takes a long time.
I'm going to be dead before an
Yeah.
inch has come back. Right. So that soil that we talk about that covers much of the earth now and that our lives depend upon, no soil, no people. Sorry, guys, just won't happen. That's partly a mixture of broken up bedrock. And so we call it dirt at this point, just dirt. And depending on your bedrock and the climate, your dirt is going to be different in different parts of the world. When the plants start growing and dying, and the mouse and the bird, that is incorporated usually by worms and other things that we can't even see that live in the soil, that enriches the soil, and it's organic matter. Those magic words. How much organic matter do you have in your soil? More important than what your investments in the stock market are. All righty. Let me think for a minute. Why is that important? Why can't we just grow things in dirt? Well, Christian, if we do it hydroponically, we can grow it in water with a bunch of chemicals, but I don't want to do that. I want to grow my plants in soil that is enriched with organic matter, because once upon a time I was a chemist. That plant with its roots needs to absorb essentially chemicals,
Mhm.
especially nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, and some others. But those chemicals need to be in a certain solution. The nitrogen can come in a variety of ways, and they all have to be liquid. And the organic matter in your soil is what breaks down the indigestible nutrients so that the plants can absorb them as food and prosper and grow. So that's one thing organic matter does. Another thing, and this is really important for modern day gardeners because of this climate change and all the crazy weather, it helps the organic matter as it's breaking down becomes humus, an in between step. And that enables the soil to kind of crumble up on itself and make what is called an aggregate or a friable soil. And anybody in Allegheny County, Christian, I don't know if you've gotten a spade and went out in your backyard and down in Hornell, but a lot of the soil here is clay. And it's just, it's not friable, it's not crumbly, it doesn't easily dig up and stay loose. But the more humus you have, more organic matter, the more crumbly it will remain. And of course, go back to day one, dirt is dirt. Soil, am I going to pick on you? Do you remember? Oh, she's old. Do you remember what is soil? It's not all dirt. What is it?
It's the organic matter and all of the bugs and critters that live in there.
Okay. What about the air and the water?
Oh, yeah. And the air and the water too.
Okay. It's about half dirt. And the other half is half air spaces and half water. And so one of the reasons we love earthworms, all those free engineers that are tunneling around, making air spaces that the water can run down into. And the more humus you have, the more organic matter, the more crumbly it'll be, the more easily the earthworms can work. I mean, you know how it is. Who wants to do, if I have a choice of picking my garden or picking the original field, which is right next to it, if I'm an earthworm, I'm going to come to my garden because it's nice and loose and has also lots of food for the earthworms, all the organic material, especially the leaves. So anyway, let me see here. What did I forget? Oh, and it also the humus acts as a sponge. So you have that downpour. So instead of the water running off, it's like a sponge. It's soaked up and it's held. And then another 2 weeks goes by and there's no rain. And then that spongy organic matter will release the water back into your soil. So that's a good thing. All right, questions before we move on to hot piles versus cold piles? Christian
Yes.
or Regina, got a question?
Okay.
No questions?
Regina, did you say yes or no?
I said okay.
Oh, you said okay. All right.
Yeah.
Christian, do you have a comment so far?
No, it's pretty, interesting. Like mentioning before, like all this ecosystem of the soil where everything is important because a lot of people just believe that it's just dirt, it's just soil, like something inorganic, it's not alive.
Right, it's
And
not alive, right?
that is not alive. And the truth is there is thousands of life, just microorganisms and relationships that where everything is connected and everything helps to make the plants grow. And that's the important part where, for example, some hydroponics, another different crops, they don't take in count. And sometimes there is some problems with the diseases, with pests, or the quality of the fruit, or just the nutrients in the fruits. And it's because it's just not the same. Like you say, it's very important. grow on the with the soil, with everything alive, where it's just naturally and it's not just a chemical from a company or a laboratory, and where after our crop cycle it can return again to the earth and keep the cycle, and it's more healthy. It's different about how the body can process a fruit from just a chemical and industrial process versus just the same plant, the same tomato, for example, that we grow in our own garden, just with the directly on the with the soil and taking care of every aspect of the soil.
Okay. I just want to reiterate two things. Back in the day when we were hunter-gatherers and Mother Nature was more or less in control, depending on the soil in different, say your territory was a 50-mile radius, your tribe lived within that territory. And depending on the time of the year, you moved around that territory, you gathered the nuts or the berries or the roots or whatever was ripe at a certain time. Now those berries, nuts, and roots would grow in certain places, usually where Mother Nature had provided what they needed, or they evolved to fit that particular situation. And usually the density of the nuts and the fruits wasn't that great. Once we started farming, we wanted everything we wanted to eat to grow right here in our backyard. And we wanted to have twice as many green beans than if we went out and picked the wild beans. So what we were doing was, in a sense, forcing Mother Nature to be unnatural, because that particular plot naturally might not have everything that that particular crop needed. So that's where science began, I think, in agriculture. All right, I want my tomatoes to grow here. Normally they don't grow here. What do they have in their natural habitat, climate, soil, that I have to reproduce here to make them grow really well? And then I want twice as many or 3 times as many. So what do I do to do that?
Yeah.
And so
Nutrition.
and another thing, nutrition. Just a quick aside, Regina, you probably know this. They have bred recently carrots. The darker they are, the more orange, reddish, the more keratin, vitamin A they have. And the difference is sometimes 3 or 4 times more vitamin A in the darker carrots than in the pale ones. So unless you have an aversion to dark orange for some reason, you should be growing and eating those because you get much more vitamin A. Or your soil happens to be shallow and clayey. You're not going to be able to grow those long, thin 10-inch carrots. So they've bred shorter, blockier carrots. So the science, I forget, what is it called? This blah, 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 whatever the science is that focuses on this. And now it's focusing on how do we grow corn when it's too damn hot? All right. Corn will not grow in India when it's 110, like it's been for several days now or weeks, 110 in India. So once again, our scientists who study genetics and breeding have to figure out how can we continue to grow our wheat and our corn and our soybeans, the 3 biggies of the West, in a rapidly warming climate. So we're getting a little off the topic, but to get back to our compost heaps. As I said, once upon a time, I had a degree in chemistry and math. And in the early days, when I was younger and more in the need of following the rules, I would try, you're laughing, I would try and build my compost heap according to the rules, which if you make it very general rule of thumb, about 90% brown stuff, think leaves, manure, I guess, and 10% green stuff, grass clippings, weeds. I don't know where the dead mice come in, somewhere in Anyway, and you would layer your pile, and you would have to have a minimum of 4. Regina?
Yeah?
Oh, I thought I heard you ask me a question.
No,
No.
I'm listening. I just was setting the phone down.
Oh, okay. 4 feet by 4 by 4. And that's enough material that's decomposing. Anybody that's lived in the country knows if you stack your barn full of wet hay, what's going to happen to your barn?
Oh, I don't know, but the hay
Catch
will
on.
mold.
It's going to catch on fire. I had a neighbor
Oh, really?
just before I moved here 40 years ago. The neighbor's barn burnt down because they stacked the hay when it was too wet. So it begins to decompose, gives off heat. If it gets hot enough, you can burn your barn down. So
Oh, that happens to mulch piles in the places where they manufacture mulch.
yes,
You know, like in Florida, they have big, huge mounds of, and then they catch on fire.
yep. Well, they should turn them more often, putting the hot insides to the outsides. But even with backhoes, that's a lot of work. And so people tend to be lazy or they want to save money. And yeah, so their piles catch on fire. But your pile's not going to catch on fire. It's not going to be big enough. But you need to be 4 by 4 by 4, and you layer it, and you leave the top slightly concave to catch any moisture. And theoretically, after 2 weeks, you get your hubby to flip it. Bring the outside to the in and the inside to the out. And then another 2 weeks, you do the same thing, and maybe a month later, and then maybe a month later. Well, somewhere along, and then if it gets too dry, you got to water it. Well, somewhere along the line, as I got older, I decided I was going to revert to Mother Nature's way of doing things. I have patience. I can wait. I don't need compost ready in a month or 2 or 3. I can wait 2 years. So I strongly suggest you do what I did. And I wish maybe I'll bring my camera. We talked about pictures and I'll show you the difference. My compost heap tends to run almost 20 feet long along the edge of the garden and a good 4 or 5, almost 6 feet wide. But it's only at the most 2-3 feet high. However, I divide that length into half. So I have a 2-year cycle. Let's begin year 1. Nothing, you have nothing. So the first 10 feet, that's where I make my compost heap that year. And all I do is whatever it is gets piled there. The eggshells, the dead lettuce, the weeds,
How
anything.
about tea bags?
Tea bags, include the paper.
When you do tea bags, do you take the little staple out of the tea bags?
Well, first of
You
all,
do?
I don't use tea bags, but I think that the tiny little staples will just rust away after a year or 2.
So they're okay?
I think so.
Yeah, okay. That's what I've been doing.
Yeah, all right.
In the newspaper, can you include colored pages?
No,
Okay.
the colored pages of magazines, especially, or newspapers, the ink is not good for your garden or you, I guess. So it's
Just
black and white. Yep. All righty. And I don't bother shredding anything. I just dump it. And so after a year of gardening, 4 or 5 months, I've got a nice pile. And usually in the fall, then I cover it with maybe 6 inches of leaves just to cover it up. Year 2. Now the next 10 feet that has just been sitting there doing nothing, that's where I make that year's pile. And what do I do with the old pile? In the middle, I kind of pull aside, I don't know, maybe a bucket's worth of space, dump in a bucket of good soil from the garden. And that's where I put my 1 pie pumpkin and 1 butternut squash together in a circle. And it is truly amazing. 2 things. 1 tiny little seed. And I got 18 butternut squashes from that 1 little seed and about 15 pie pumpkins.
Wow.
Because of, first of all, the depth of the what had become essentially soil, composting on its way down to becoming soil rich in compost, and the extra nutrients that were there. So meanwhile, that second summer, I keep building up my new compost pile on the other end, and the vines keep growing. Eventually, they're vigorous. So come the end of July, I get my scissors and I go out and I start trimming them when they, when they get 10 feet by 6 feet, and tossing the trimmings on the on the new compost heap. And I still get all those squashes and pumpkins out of there. Now, then in September, when I harvest those, I toss the vines over on the new compost heap. And now I have a pile that's about 10 feet long and 5 or 6 feet across. And if it started out 2 feet high, it's now a foot high. That's my compost. It took me 1.5 years, 2 growing seasons and a winter to accomplish that without turning, just dumping. And I spread it on my rows in the vegetable garden in the fall, in October. And years ago, I used to spade it up and mix it in. And now I just kind of wiggle. We'll talk about that some other time. The plowing versus the spading versus letting the worms do it all kind of thing. So the disadvantages of my system is that it doesn't kill the weed seeds because it doesn't get hot enough. And it doesn't probably kill the pathogens. So I don't have a lot of trouble with that in my garden, diseases and fungi and whatnot. If I spot a sick plant, it goes into the trash. Or if it's the fall, I burn it up in my wood stove. Okay, I don't put it in the compost heap to begin with. And
you don't put any bad vegetation that has mold or fungus on in your compost?
I don't tend to have that problem, Regina, but I guess I wouldn't if I did. Because once again, my compost doesn't get hot enough to kill it. I'm just thought of a terrible example, and you know me, if I think it, I say it. It's like at the beginning of COVID when we didn't know, and we sent the old folks back to recuperate at the old folks home or the nursing homes, and they spread the disease, and a lot of people died. Now we know, so we don't do that. So I would suggest it's somewhat similar. If you have a sick plant, don't put it in your compost heap unless you're running a hot one.
Okay.
Okay. Let me think for a minute.
So because yours isn't as deep, it doesn't get as hot. Is that why?
Well, no, because I don't count 90%, 10%.
Oh, it doesn't have the right mixture.
It doesn't have necessarily the right
Okay.
mixture, and it's not layered, and I don't shred it first, and I don't turn it.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but I figure if Mother Nature could do it her way for several million years, who am I to argue? So anyway, all righty. And especially as you get older, just you wait, you'll get older. So will you, Kristen. Regina and I are in the more elderly category, and we've got enough to do without having to turn the compost heap. So anyway.
I have another question.
Yep.
I've camped all my life, and when you camp, a lot of people now believe you should not transport firewood from one location to another.
Yes.
Because of the bacteria and stuff. So I was wondering, like with your compost, like if I put a banana peel in there, my banana peel is from Central America.
Yep.
I mean, is that really a bad thing, or does it matter?
Okay, once again, almost certainly your banana has been sprayed to death while it was growing and while it was shipped. So I wouldn't worry about anything surviving on the banana peel to infest America. Okay.
And it's going to decompose.
And it's decomposing. And once again, someday we'll have an argument or a discussion about what's the difference between buying chemical fertilizers, nitrogen is nitrogen, and using natural materials that decompose into nitrogen. because as a chemist, to me, a molecule of N2
Mhm.
is a molecule of N2. It doesn't matter where it originally came from, but there are other things involved in just the end product. So Regina, even if you have a cold pile, I wouldn't worry about that. I'd worry more about the raccoon getting in there and digging up the banana peel.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been lucky. I live out in the country with bears and everything else on down the line from black bears. And knock on wood, in 34 years, nothing's gotten into my,
So that leads me to my question.
okay.
Can I compost if I live in town? Am I going to be attracting
Okay,
critters?
probably not.
Okay.
I won't say for sure, because raccoons especially are very clever devils, and they probably have a good sense of smell, you
Right.
know, and that's why a lot of people in the cities or towns
Mhm.
buy a barrel composter.
Okay.
You know, it stands 4 feet high or so, and it's about 2-3 feet around. And some of them, my sister has one. I call her the yuppie gardener. She doesn't listen to this. She lives in Connecticut. She's the yuppie gardener who lives in Connecticut, and she bought one of these where it turns.
Mhm.
And she's so pleased with herself. She can get compost, you know, the coffee grinds, this and that, and the other thing, all within a month.
Mm.
Yeah.
those
They
things
have them at the
cost-
hardware store here.
They cost money.
Mhm.
You know me, I like to save money if I can do it without buying something.
And so the animals can't get into
That's
that?
right. The animals can't get into it.
Okay.
Right. Also, if you have an enclosed compost heap, Rima asked, and I didn't get to it. I asked the two librarians to come up with questions for today, and Rima wanted to know how to build with actual sides. So I suggested she go down to a source in town and pick up, hopefully free, a minimum of 3 pallets made of wood. You know what pallets are? Do you know, Christian, what a pallet is? They're used in shipping, and they're usually 4 feet by 4, made with wood that has like a lattice. But you can put 3 of them up on 3 sides, and I suggested you leave the other side open. And you just pile everything in there, and then you don't cover it either. Some people just like things, I don't know, squared up, right angles.
Yeah.
Anyway, just dump it on the
Well,
ground.
yeah, I'm trying to do something like that, and I was going to do concrete blocks around 3 sides,
But
or
that's
2 sides, because
You're-
it's where I'm putting mine. It's like there's a steep little hill in the back, and then in the
Yep.
front there's a concrete pad. But I was
That's-
going to put, when I can, concrete blocks on each side of it, you know, to
All right.
do that kind of thing. And it
Two-
makes it neater, and it makes it contain. And I hope, like, sometimes my eggshells are out in the yard, so some animal
Yeah,
comes during the night and moves the eggshells.
yeah. Okay, 2 things. Remind me about what not to put in. But the thing with concrete blocks is, first of all, you usually have to buy them. And second of all, they will leach and create a more alkaline soil because of what
Oh,
cement that's in the concrete leaches out.
oh, okay.
Okay.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, not a huge amount, but a bit. Now, what you don't put in your compost heap: 1, any kind of meat, any kind of fat. That's butter, oil, cheeses, probably.
Yeah, dairy
Um,
products.
Dairy products, thank you. And there was a 4th thing. What was it?
Bones.
What?
The animal parts, like bones. And some
Bones.
people ask
Bones.
about.
Yeah. Oh, there was and cat or dog litter.
Yeah.
Somehow horse litter, horse manure, cow manure, chicken manure, they don't carry pathogens that I don't believe, get sick from. But cats and dogs do have some diseases that we can pick up if we used their cat litter in our compost heap. That was what the 4th one was. Actually, and I can't resist this, I forget if it's the state of Washington or Oregon or both, but legally last year they passed a law. You can now compost grandma instead of burying her in the cemetery. Yes, Christian, it's a new
Really?
law up in the Northwest.
Compost
People,
Compost what?
people, grandma.
Really?
Yes.
I
Human
read a book
compost.
about this. Yes, it's a huge thing in Spain, I guess, does
Oh,
it?
Spain?
And maybe another country, they do that, like a natural sort of burial where you just get composted and then you can live on to grow a tree.
Grow a tree. Oh, okay.
Well,
at this-
I saw that in like South Carolina about 10 years ago. There's a place there you can just go, just bury your body in the ground
no,
without
that's
any
different.
covering.
That-
Or,
That's called a green burial. And when my friend John
Oh.
died about 7 years ago here, Allegheny County, as long as you have a official, more, the people that bury the dead, what are they called?
Like an
mortician.
Undertaker. As long as you have an undertaker present, you can have a green burial if you have, I forget if it's an acre or 2 acres, whatever it is on your property. But that's different than
Wow.
composting.
Mhm.
Oh, I guess so.
Yep. Now, there was another lingering
Huh.
thought, comes and goes. Oh, well. We need to move on. Any more questions about composting before we get to tools? What time is it? I never can tell what time it is.
1207.
12.
12:07. Okay, we have about 20 minutes. Tools. Anybody have questions about the compost heap before we move on? What did I forget?
Well, tell me what the difference is between a cold compost. I never heard that before, or hot compost.
Okay, a hot compost is where you take, you listen to the chemists and you take care in how you layer roughly 90% of brown stuff, that's carbon, with 10% of green stuff, that's nitrogen. And when you have that combination, 90-10 of carbon to nitrogen, it will break down much more rapidly. And if it's piled up at least 4 by 4 by 4, it gets hot enough in the middle to kill your pathogens, the bad guys. The worms will all leave. They're smart. And the weed seeds, most weed seeds. And it takes maybe by 3-4 months, depending on how fine it was and how diligent you are in turning it and keeping it damp, not soggy. You can have compost ready to go within 3 months or so. The warmer your climate, the quicker it happens.
Yeah.
And composting became popular in the West 100 or so years ago by some British colonialists in India, because in India, it's so hot that any kind of humus in the soil rapidly, or organic matter rapidly deteriorates and dissipates. So it was hard to have heavily productive gardening in India because you just couldn't keep the organic content in your soil long enough. And so I believe it was that started, and I forget exactly when, I'm going to say roughly 100 years ago, with this idea of incorporating more, or you're really stealing from Peter to pay Paul. You know, where does this organic matter come from? Your field or your neighbor's leaves, or so by enriching your little plot, you're really making someplace else a little poorer, but we don't usually think about that. All right. Ready to go to tools then? Are you done, Regina? And the cold
Yep.
just takes longer, 2 years maybe, because you just dump stuff.
Okay.
All right. Now, some of you know me well enough to know, in many ways, I'm a minimalist, whether it's art, my furniture, my clothes, and the garden. I don't believe in a lot of stuff, whatever that stuff is. And my second husband, he was a tools man. Man, if there was another tool out there, he just had to have it. Whereas now, before we get going on what you really need for tools in your garden is the following. Save your money and buy quality. Because if you buy a good tool that's designed to do what it's supposed to do and fits your body size, and you take care of it, it will outlive you unless somebody steals it or your house burns down and it burns up in the house. You will pass it on to your grandchild, and if he takes care of it, or she, I happen to have a boy grandchild, it'll probably outlast him too. So quality, now that's going to cost money. Let me tell you the tale about my LL Bean boots. I have bought LL Bean boots about every 8 to 10 years for the last 50 or so years, and they last about 10 years. A few years ago, I saw a lady in Walmart in front of me in the line, and she had on what looked like, but wasn't, LL Bean boots. I said, hey, where'd you get those? Well, she'd got them at some local store. I said, do you mind if I ask you how much they cost? And she said, yeah, they were $20. I said, how long do they last you? About 2 years, she said. Now, my boots at that time cost $60 and lasted 10 years. Let's do the math.
Yeah.
The problem, of course, with being poor is you can't afford the upfront money. But if you can manage to give up the cigarettes or the beer or whatever and save your money and buy a quality shovel or spading fork or pruning shears and take care of them, they will last. Now, how do you take care of them? You don't leave them outside at the end of the day. About 10 years or so ago, I left, what was it? I think it was my hoe out by maybe 50 feet from the house in the clearing where the fireplace was. Maybe I was thinking I was going to come back and do something with another fire the next morning. Usually I don't leave them out, but I left the hoe out and then I forgot it for about 4 days. When I went out to retrieve it, the red squirrel had decided, you know, your hands sweat the salt, and the top of the wooden handle was neatly chewed down to a point.
Oh, wow.
I know. Well, that's a bit unusual, but what will happen is they'll rust. And if you want your tools to last, given time, you've all gone through the woods. My woods, it was, you know, I still find rusty metal disintegrating to nothing over 40, 50, 60 years. Eventually, if humans vanish, all our metal eventually will oxidize one way or another, and there'll be nothing left of the tools. So when you're done with it for the day, I keep trying, my grandson's now 24 and he hasn't learned this yet. You clean it off out in the garden. And then I actually rinse it off in the house, dry it well. And years ago, I didn't bother sharpening my tools that often. What a dummy. If you're going to use a hoe that's dull, you might as well do what our ancestors did and get a stick and poke around in the dirt with a stick. The reason a hoe is so effective is its shape and its metal, but it has to be sharp. So now whenever I use my hand shears or my hoe or the shovel, after I've cleaned it off outside, rinsed it off and dried it inside, I get my flat file and I spend maybe 2 minutes sharpening it up. And what a difference it makes. You can experiment if you don't believe me. So then once a year in the fall, and I usually think somewhere towards the end of October that I'm done, but then again, something always comes up in early November. So wait until maybe Thanksgiving, and then you're done with the garden. You take all your tools, and once again, you make sure the metal is all clean, sharpen them, and then I use mineral oil. You know, that stuff you put on your baby's bottom? Have a bottle of that, lasts forever. Just a tiny coating of mineral oil. Take the extra off. And then they say linseed oil. And years ago, that's what I used to use on my wooden handles. Sometimes, especially as they get older, you do get some splinters or rough spots. So you get your rough sandpaper and you smooth your wooden handles down, clean them off. And then I use the mineral oil now because it's, once again, I'm a minimalist, 1 bottle instead of 2. And I just very lightly, no extra. You want to take any extra off. And then there they sit for the winter, all clean and protected with the oil.
I have a question.
Yep.
What did you do to the handle where the squirrel chewed on it?
I got out the rough sandpaper and I spent an hour hand sanding it down so it wasn't rough, but it was still pointy.
Yeah, okay.
Yep, I don't do that
Okay.
anymore. I don't leave things out anymore. Now, what do you need? Where's my list? Buy the best, take care of them, sharpen them, oil them, linseed, da 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 da. Here's what I use. A shovel. And for me, that means the long-handled shovel that comes to a point. The metal part comes to a point. And the top of the metal part is flanged. So when you step on it, you don't slice your boot. Obviously, you can use a shovel for all sorts of things. I still have my spading fork, although I use it less than I used to since I don't spade the whole garden in the fall. But a spading fork is shorter and has a T handle and usually has 4, maybe 5, 10-inch long, sturdy, thick blades, forks. And that's really helpful if you are digging in the woods where there's a lot of roots, or you want to dig up your daffodils to spread them out, or anything like that. Now, a rake. I hem and haw about the rake. I have 2, but if you can only afford one, it's like, well, which one should they get? The traditional garden rake, once again, a long handle, and it's about 18 inches wide, and it has, 2 to 3 inch long, what do they call? Not tongues, blade, not blades either, whatever.
Tines.
Tines, thank you. And they're fairly strong. They're not going to break off. That can be used for a variety of things. I also have a grass rake because even though I don't usually rake the grass in the lawn, once in a blue moon I do. What else? A hoe. Now there are all sorts of hoes, and my husband had lots of them. But I just use the old-fashioned hoe. You know, it's about 4 or 5 inches wide and just one blade, and you can use that for a variety of things. I think a hand trowel, you could get away with one of your kitchen tablespoons if you were really hit up for money, but a hand trowel is handy. For a couple of years, I did without a wheelbarrow. Then one of my girlfriends for Mother's Day surprised me with a wheelbarrow. We had to put it together. Oh, I hate that. It took the 2 of us 2 hours, and we're not dummies, but it took us 2 hours to put. But once you have a wheelbarrow, you think, how did I ever live without a wheelbarrow? You know, it saves a lot of time and a lot of effort. Get one with big wheels. Probably you're going to need a hose or 2. 50-footers. That goes back to, I forgot to mention that when we talked the first time around about where do you put your garden. You really don't want it 700 feet away from your water faucet, because that's going to mean at 50 feet, 14 hoses, not good. So you want it somewhere, and the deer are much more likely to munch on it when it's way out there. So you probably will need a hose, and then you need to decide, do I want a regular old hose? Do I want a soaker hose? I'm going to let you all research that rather than spend any time on it. There's different theories. Do you want a hose that does this and half your water evaporates, or the one that goes on the rectangle? That's for you to decide. Hand pruners. I think you need hand pruners, even if you don't have shrubbery. If it comes down to if you have an asparagus bed in the fall, you can do it with scissors. It'll be a lot easier with, or your broccoli or whatever, hand pruners. And I also have a pitchfork, because once again, I find that easier to dig up my potatoes in the fall with my pitchfork. And also when I do rake up my grass once a year, I have a big lawn, it's so much easier with the pitchfork to load it into the wheelbarrow. Yeah. So those, now there's lots more stuff. Oh, the other thing you might want is, in the hardware store here in town has them, And I've lost 2 over the years. Some archaeologist was going to find my 2 hickory knives. One's only about, the blade's only about 5 inches long, and the other was like 7 or 8 inches long. And they're really tough knives, not stainless steel, so you can't let them get rusty, but they do sharpen up pretty well, and a nice solid wood handle. And I just, those dandelions, the knife's in the house, I'll just pull it and it breaks off. And then of course that bottom root grows again. So any kind of weeding like that, a nice sturdy knife that you don't lose, and they're brown, the handles are brown. They should be painted red so you can find them in the lawn when you lay them down somewhere and forget where they are. So who has other tools they use that they like, that they want to mention? Christian, what kind of tools do you need that I forgot?
Well, the same. Yeah, the hand shovel, houses. Yeah, I think you mentioned like the basic ones.
Okay. You know what I
So-
did forget, and I just popped in my head. You need a notebook and a pencil.
Yeah.
And a permanent ink marker. At our Master Gardeners meeting, Dave brought those plants, and there were 2 kinds of peppers, Melanie. One was the hot pepper and one was the sweet. And he had used a regular pen to mark them, and the rain had washed it away. He
Oh,
didn't know
no.
which was which.
Yeah.
Well, I went through that years ago. So now I have a fat permanent marker. And also, years ago, I'd say, oh, Cosmos, Marigolds, Cleome. I'll remember what's what. Don't remember what's what anymore. They come up and it's like, were those the lima beans or were those the beans? So you get a magic marker, and I had lent these cups to Rima, the other librarian, a few weeks ago so she could plant some lettuce early. And as you can see, I have used these for years. So they all have these past history. The last year was the candy tuft flower, but before that was calendula and purple basil and rosemary and something or other. Anyway, magic marker. And why do we need a notebook? Because once again, especially as you get older, if you have a small garden, and we will talk about rotating later on in the summer, why we want to rotate our crops from year to year, you'll not remember. I promise you. Come next April, it's like, well, now where did I plant the broccoli last year? So you have a map of your garden. And not only do I put down my 10 broccoli plants, I mark when I sowed them indoors, what the date was, and when I put them in the cold frame outside, and when I planted them outside, and then when I harvested them. So you need a big enough piece of paper, or you divide your garden up into sections. So you have, it's nice to have it all in one spot. It's really annoying to have to find 3 notebooks to, when did I plant these in the house and when, etc. Okay, and what variety? Because once again, you might want to experiment. Maybe you didn't like the broccoli. It was too small. It was too late. It just didn't taste good, whatever. So you're going to try something different next year. So a notebook keeps a record of what you did the year before. And then also, usually around late August, I go out in the garden with the notebook, or maybe a new page, or maybe if my map is big enough, I can do it right there. This is the year the Colorado potato beetle showed up, and when it showed up, and what I did to get rid of it. Or this is the year my spinach just didn't grow. Question mark. Why? So you have a record of what you did and what happened, and maybe then suggestions for the following year. Regina, do you have a notebook that you keep track of what's what?
No, but I should, because I planted 8 squill last year and I only know where 6 are this year.
All right.
I planted, those bulbs you recommended. I had 6 come up, and I don't know where I put the other 2.
Okay, I don't know about squill. I do know about crocus and tulips. Squirrels and chipmunks, especially the crocus, will dig them up and eat them. I'm not sure about squill. I think they're a little,
Well,
but so they
I
might be
don't think they.
somewhere. Or
Yeah, well,
maybe
you know,
they
I
just
did put the
died.
cayenne. I put the cayenne pepper over them, and very liberally, and I had daffodils too. So all of them, except all the bulbs I planted, except 2 squill, have come up and bloomed.
Alrighty. Now, once again, you don't have to bother wasting your pepper on the daffodils. They're poisonous, so nothing bothers them. Top, middle, bottom.
Oh,
Uh-huh. And on the squill, you know, it's like, I keep coming up with these terrible analogies. All the babies that are born every year don't survive day 1 either. So even in the natural world of the squill, say, if you had 10 or 12, maybe 1 or 2 are just not going to grow no matter what you do. Or maybe they were in a slightly wetter spot and they rotted.
yeah. It's just starting to rain here.
I'm glad I didn't open up my cold frame.
Mm.
All right, and we must be getting on towards time. What time is it?
12:27.
12. We have 3 minutes.
Mhm.
Any questions on the topic? I'm pretty
Yeah.
strict. Okay, Christian, I've laid down the rules about 2 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, whatever it was. Questions on the topic. Otherwise, depending on how many people we have, things can get out of control because people ask all sorts of things about all sorts of things. So anyway.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about when you're doing your compost, you cover with the black or white plastic.
No, I don't. I told the ladies here at the library years ago when my grandson came to live with me for that first year when he was 6. For some reason, and I don't remember why, I covered up my quite large compost heap with black plastic in the fall. So on a nice, warm, sunny May day, I said to Jordan, come help me take the black plastic off. I want to save it and for something else. And we went out, and it was probably at least 12 feet square, 12 feet by 12 feet. We pulled off the plastic, and there were like 15 snakes of all sizes and colors. Little
Oh my
ones,
God.
coral ones,
No.
little ones with green bellies, big ones. Well, Jordan was just so excited. And of course, all the snakes just went slithering away into the field. So no, I don't cover my compost heap. I think if you live in a very rainy place, then the idea of covering it is so it doesn't get too wet and soggy. But usually, well, everything's changing weather-wise, but usually here in Allegheny County, we would, through the spring and summer up until September, we used to have a fairly even, maybe 3 inches of rain a month, which was good. And then September and October tended to be dry. Now all that's gone up. With global warming, we can't rely on that anymore.
Yeah.
Why would you cover it? Why would you suggest you cover it?
No, I was asking because yeah, there is some people who covers like especially for rain. Another reason is to do it quickly, like to increase
Yes.
the temperature inside.
The clear plastic will make it hotter than the black plastic, but it also allows.
Oh, really?
Huh? Yeah, but it also allows more weed seeds to grow.
Yeah, because
didn't-
that creates like the greenhouse effect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I-
you can put
I
your
would-
weed seeds or your weeds in your compost.
I do,
Okay.
and because I don't make it hot, when they will sprout in the garden. You know, when I put it out in the fall, next
Okay.
spring, I do. But then again, I mulch my garden by
Mhm.
early. We'll talk about mulching. I don't know, maybe next time or the time after. Because
So you do put your weeds in your garden. I mean, in your
Yeah,
compost.
yes, I do. And then what happens is, of course, because it doesn't get hot enough, they survive. And so the second year, when I put the compost out on my garden rows and wiggle it into the soil, the top inch or so, then it sits over the winter, but usually in spring. And I don't usually mulch that part of the garden where I want to plant early, because a mulch will keep your soil cooler, colder, longer. You can't plant as early. But after middle to late of May, when things are up and the soil has warmed up, then I remulch the garden with a couple inches of usually mowed leaves. And that will take care of almost all the weeds that want to grow, because most weeds need sunlight to germinate. So if you put 2 inches of mulched leaves on top of them, they're in the dark. They don't grow. Usually.
And you're not particular about what kind of weeds at all?
No. I mean, there's some weeds I really dislike, but what are you going to do? Okay, this is another, and then we have to stop. Beware of what you love and bring to your garden. You all who live here in Alfred know, Christian, is this your first spring here?
Second.
Second. All right, maybe
Yeah.
you have noticed in the village, all the tiny white flowers that are growing in many lawns, the chamomile. And also a blue haze of, beware of titles of flowers, speedwell. I always loved that blue haze in my friend's lawn here in town. So about 10 years ago, I just brought 1 or 2 clumps up. I also love violets in the lawn. So I brought in some purple violets. They love it. And they are speedwell, they're weeds. And so now if they stayed in the lawn, that'd be fine. They don't.
They like
And-
that nice compost.
And they love my herb garden with the gravel mulch. So it's like, oh, I gotta go out and weed these out again, you know. So be careful. Violets are beautiful in the lawn, but they're also very weedy.
Thank you. I gotta go.
Okay, bye, Regina.
Bye, Mary Lou. Thank you so much, everybody.
Okay, will I see you
Okay,
tomorrow,
have a good
Kristen?
day.